At 70, your body can't cheat the math. Hoisting a mainsail delivers 50 foot-pounds of torque to a shoulder that has already logged 6 decades. The brokers say it is time to quit. But what if the cockpit itself could solve the problem? The answer is 3 upgrades that do not just extend your sailing years, they determine whether you will ever raise the anchor alone again. The real test starts with a single measured struggle. A rigger clamps a load cell to the halyard and starts the hoist. The first few feet slide up with little resistance, but as the sail approaches the spreaders, the numbers on the gauge begin to climb. Each crank of the winch handle now delivers more than 40 foot-pounds of torque, 50, even 60, focused through a shoulder joint that has already lost a third of its original strength. The load curve plotted in real time shows a sharp spike in the final 10 feet of the hoist. This is not a gradual ramp, it is a wall. Most sailors in their 70s can manage the early stages by hand, but the last third demands repeated, high-torque pulls, each one flirting with the threshold orthopedic surgeons warn about. Clinical studies show that repetitive loads above 50 foot-pounds, especially with the arm elevated, are exactly what drive rotator cuff tears in older adults. The rigger's demonstration captures this. The transition from manageable to hazardous is abrupt, and the peak load is both measurable and unforgiving. Without mechanical assistance, this is where shoulders fail, seasons end, and the boat sits idle. The cockpit's original design never accounted for this spike, and muscle alone cannot bridge the gap. An electric cabin top winch changes the mainsail hoist from a test of endurance into a controlled 2-minute operation. Press the button, and the motor delivers a steady pull. No hesitation, no risk of a sudden jerk that can tear a tendon. The numbers are plain. A typical 12-volt winch draws about 80 to 100 amps during the hardest part of the hoist. Over 2 minutes, that uses less energy than a marine refrigerator uses in a single hour. Anderson and Lumar representatives have run these tests side by side, logging amp hours and real-time hoist durations. A full main on a 40-foot boat, up in under 2 minutes, costs about 2 to 3 amp hours, roughly 25 to 35 watt-hours. For context, a small 12-volt refrigerator pulls 3 to 5 amps, running almost constantly in the summer. The winch peak draw is high, but the total energy used is modest, and well within what a standard 200 amp-hour battery bank can handle. The stigma that powered winches are an indulgence does not hold up under these numbers. The engineering is simple. Swap muscle for current, and you get a safer, more predictable hoist. No more bracing for the final grind, and no more risking a shoulder on the last few feet. The system is built for repeatable, efficient lifts, with manual override always available if needed. This is not about luxury, it is about using the right tool for the job, and keeping the sailor, not just the sail, in service. A Milwaukee right-angle drill paired with a winch bit adapter delivers the same mechanical advantage as a powered winch for a fraction of the price, roughly $300 all in. This approach has spread across cruising forums and dockside conversations for one reason. It puts real torque in your hands without wiring, deck surgery, or battery upgrades. But the tool itself is only half the story. The right angle geometry is not just a convenience, it is a safeguard. When a winch jams or the sail binds, a standard drill can twist your wrist or elbow in an instant. The right angle design lines up the force with your arm, reducing the risk of injury if the drill stalls. A Milwaukee field specialist lays out the protocol. First, always use the drill's low-speed, high-torque setting. Second, set the clutch to slip before the drill can reach its maximum torque. Never trust your wrist to absorb a stall. Third, grip the main handle with one hand and brace the side handle with the other. Fourth, keep your body offset from the axis of rotation. Fifth, start and stop in smooth, controlled bursts. Never blip the trigger at full power. Sixth, never operate the drill unless you are watching both the line and the sail for snags or overrides. This method keeps the retrofit within reach for nearly any budget, but it only works if you treat the drill as a power tool, not a toy. Used correctly, it turns a heavy hoist into a safe, one-person job, and it does it without a single new wire run or breaker added to your panel. A single flat plastic slide, buried halfway up a mast from the 1980s, can turn a routine reef into a hazardous scramble. Under load, the friction coefficient of aged nylon against corroded aluminum more than doubles, especially when salt and oxidation roughen the groove. The problem is not just age, it is deformation. Decades of compression flatten the slide's bearing surface, making it wedge and bind under tension. The rigger's gauge tells the story. What should be a smooth drop suddenly spikes, with pull forces jumping from 10 to 40 pounds or more just to break the slide free. In a blow, that resistance means the mainsail refuses to come down from the cockpit. The only way to finish the job is to go forward, brace a shoulder against the mast, and haul down by hand, one foot slipping on a pitching deck, the other tangled in lines. Corrosion. In the mast groove acts like sandpaper, grinding away at both the hardware and the sailor's resolve. The risk compounds with every season. Slides that once moved easily now jam, and the force required to reef or drop the sail can quadruple compared to a new system. This is not a rare failure. On boats built before the era of external track systems, it is the default. The numbers are not theoretical. Practical tests show that old slides under full luff tension can demand as much as 60 pounds of pull to start moving. When the weather turns, that friction becomes the hidden enemy, forcing older sailors into exactly the kind of exposed, high-risk work that ends careers, not just afternoons. A Tides Marine rep sets a spring scale on a legacy mast groove. With the sail loaded to typical luff tension, the pull required to move a single nylon slide jumps past 40 pounds. The car jerks, binds, then finally breaks free in a stuttering motion. Friction here is not just a nuisance, it is a mechanical wall, quadrupling the force needed to reef or drop the sail. Now the same test but with a UHMW plastic track retrofit. The scale reads under 15 pounds. The slide glides, not grinds. The Tides rep points to the coefficient. UHMW on anodized aluminum averages 0.15, less than half that of aged nylon in a corroded groove. Next, the Harken Batcar engineer locks a ball-bearing car onto an external track. Under identical load, the force to start movement drops below 5 pounds. The rolling resistance is so minimal that when the halyard is released, the sail drops to the boom in a single controlled motion, the guillotine drop. No hands on the sail, no trip to the mast. The Batcar ball bearings bring the effective friction coefficient down to the 0.02 range, an order of magnitude less than the original setup. Both reps agree the numbers are not theoretical. In side-by-side field tests, the pull force to lower a loaded main drops by 60 to 90% with either system, depending on the starting condition of the old groove. The Tides track is lighter and lower cost. The Batcar system is engineered for maximum load and minimum resistance. What matters is the outcome, sail obedience measurable in pounds, and the ability to reef or drop from the cockpit, not the deck. The guillotine drop demo is not a trick. It is the physical proof that rolling resistance, not muscle, now controls the sail. Every year past 65, the odds of a fall on deck climb. Epidemiology from maritime and geriatric studies makes the pattern clear. After age 70, a single unbraced step on a wet cockpit sole is more likely to end with a hip fracture than a harmless bruise. The numbers are stark. 1 in 3 adults over 65 will experience a fall each year, and among sailors, the rate is higher when deck work is required in rough weather. The true risk is not the frequency of dramatic accidents, but the cumulative exposure to small, preventable hazards, a jammed sail that forces a trip forward, a stuck slide that demands a lunge, a moment spent 2 feet from a handhold. When friction is engineered out of the system, when the mainsail drops from the cockpit on command every time, The need to go forward in a blow drops by as much as 80%, according to rigging safety audits. That change is not theoretical. In fall injury case reviews, the majority of incidents among older sailors occurred during urgent deck work, reefing, freeing a stuck sail, or wrestling gear in motion. By moving these tasks back to the cockpit, the exposure to high-risk zones is cut dramatically. Risk modeling drawn from insurance data and clinical follow-up supports this projection. Eliminating the forward deck walk for sail handling can extend the window of safe, independent operation by up to a decade for sailors in their 70s. It is not a guarantee, but a probability shift. Remove the main sources of forced exposure and you reduce the chance of a career-ending injury. For many, that is the difference between selling the boat at 75 and sailing it at 85. The math is simple: less time in the red zone, more years at the helm. A physiotherapist stands in the cockpit of a 1980s cruiser, tape measure in hand. She extends her arm from the wheel toward the nearest coaming, barely half a meter before her fingertips leave solid support. On land, a healthy 70-year-old can reach forward about 35 centimeters before needing to step or risking balance. On a moving deck, that safe reach shrinks. Add heel, a slick sole, and the unpredictable lurch of a wave, and the margin for error disappears. Controls or handholds beyond 50 centimeters force a choice: either break three-point contact or take an unbraced step. In ergonomic terms, this is the cockpit's red zone, where a simple adjustment turns into a fall hazard. The original open field layout with wide gaps between handholds assumes the reflexes and stability of a much younger sailor. But balance declines with age, reaction time slows, and the ability to recover from a stumble wanes. Any control or walkway segment that sits outside that half-meter radius becomes a calculated risk. The blueprint makes it clear: stability is not just about hull shape or ballast, it is about keeping every critical move within a safe, supported reach. A fabricator positions a length of 32mm 316 stainless steel tube on the test stand, tightening the clamps over a deck section fitted with full backing plates. The load cell cable is clipped 1 meter above the base. With each pull on the hydraulic ram, the digital gauge climbs to 100 kilograms, 200, then 400 kilograms, while the bar flexes and then returns to true when the force is released. At 400 kilograms, the measured deflection is less than 3 millimeters, well within the elastic range. This is not a cosmetic grab rail. The structure is built to the same rules as a bow pulpit, with through-bolted bases and 6mm aluminum backing plates. ISO and ABYC standards for guardrails require these fittings to withstand at least 1,000 newtons of lateral load without permanent deformation. Properly engineered, the bar absorbs the full body weight of a 90-kilogram sailor in a seaway, plus a margin for shock load. The fabricator runs a final pull to 600 kilograms before the first hint of permanent bend. The safety margin is clear. A correctly designed granny bar is a primary brace, not a decorative loop. When you lean in with both hands at the mast, the structure is working at a fraction of its tested capacity. A builder stands behind a rigid dodger, hands pressed flat against the frame, then leans in with his full body weight. The gauge clipped to the handrail reads 1.2 kilonewtons, over 120 kilograms of lateral force. The structure flexes less than 3 millimeters before springing back to true. This is not a cosmetic shelter. The dodger core is solid fiberglass, supported by stainless steel stanchions, through-bolted to the coach roof and backed by 8mm aluminum plates. Every attachment point is engineered to the same standards as a bow pulpit. ISO and ABYC rules require handholds and rails to withstand at least 1,000 newtons of side load without permanent bend. On this installation, the numbers go higher. The builder runs a second test, a controlled jump, feet leaving the deck, landing with full force against the dodger frame. The load cell spikes, but the structure absorbs it, then rebounds. This is the third hand, the brace you trust when the boat lurches or your knees hesitate. Unlike canvas, a hard dodger is not just shelter from spray, it is a structural guarantee. When every move counts, this is the difference between a cockpit you can work in at 80 and one that quietly pushes you off the water. A full retrofit, measured in real dollars, totals $7,500. The electric winch, including installation and heavy gauge cabling, comes in at $3,500. The external track system, either Tides Marine ultra-high molecular weight plastic or Harken Bat Car, runs $2,500 for hardware and labor. Stainless safety rails and granny bars, fabricated to pulpit standards with proper backing plates, add $1,500. Each figure reflects current market pricing for a 38-foot to 45-foot heavy displacement cruiser based on quotes from riggers and fabricators in 2024. These are not wishful estimates or entry-level kits. They represent the actual spend required to replace muscle with engineered support. The sum is not buried in soft costs or padded with cosmetic extras. It is the hard ledger for a cockpit built to keep working as the sailor ages, with every dollar tied to a physical, measurable improvement. A yacht broker lays out the numbers. Selling a typical 1980s cruiser through a brokerage means a 10% commission, often $8,000 to $10,000 before a single repair or haul-out. That is just the fee to exit, not counting the cost of making the boat presentable or the months spent waiting for a buyer. On the medical side, an orthopedic surgeon points to the billing sheet for rotator cuff repair, $10,000 to $20,000 plus weeks of rehab and no guarantee of full strength after. Both scenarios, broker or surgeon, consume more cash than a full retrofit, and neither gives you more time on the water. The hard math is this: both the price of selling out and the price of fixing a blown shoulder exceed the cost of engineering the problem away. For the owner who wants to keep sailing, the retrofit is not an upgrade. It is the cheaper alternative to doing nothing. 5 years ago, Tom Jensen faced a choice. He could sell his 1983 cutter after a near miss on a solo passage, or invest in a suite of cockpit upgrades. At 72, he had already torn his right rotator cuff once, and he knew what a second injury would mean. He committed to the retrofit, installing an electric winch, a low-friction track, granny bars, and a hard dodger, and he logged every detail in his maintenance book. Before the upgrades, hoisting the main solo took him nearly 4 minutes and left his shoulder aching for days. After the upgrades, the same job was done in under 90 seconds. No pain, no hesitation. Reefing, once a 2-person scramble, became a one-button task from the safety of the cockpit. Tom sailed 5 more seasons, alone, covering over 4,000 nautical miles without a single forced trip to the mast in bad weather. He credits the hardware, not luck, for keeping him off the broker's list and on the water into his late 70s. Right now, more than half of active cruising sailors are over 60, yet most boats still ignore the realities of aging. Every retrofit that shifts force from flesh to hardware is an investment in independence, not indulgence. The real upgrade isn't about comfort, it's about survival on your own terms. The sea does not lower its demands, and neither should you. Which upgrade keeps you sailing? Comment below.